if we ask this person, if we could somehow, kind of look into their brain and experience the moment that they're having, do they believe that they are living in a timeless universe? And within this progression, each different slice, the human experience is that of time progressing. The universe is infinite in depth and infinite in size, but not because there is an infinite amount of stuff, but because there's only one stuff. Let's suppose that hypothetically, none of reality exists in the way that we traditionally think it does. So traditionally, let's just kind of block this off a little bit. We are existing in a three-dimensional space, or some dimension of space that we experience as 3 dimensions, and then there's some progression that we experience as time. So let's take the hypothetical perspective that this is false, and let's suppose that instead of some spatial dimension sized universe with time progressing, we think of a universe where, let's just say that this is our universe, where inside of this universe there's no such thing as time. And let's say that we place a human into this universe, and let's say that it's not just a 3-dimensional universe, but let's say it's 4 dimensions or higher. And let's say that one of these squiggly lines represents, in a 4-dimensional space that's not moving or changing through time, it represents a human life, right? There's going to be more coming up to this as the material that you end up becoming, goes into your mother and generates you. And then obviously in death, there's going to be like your body and the decomposition of that. So it's not as though there's like nothing at either end of this. But what we're saying is within this lifetime, this 4th dimensional object, there are like, if we look at any single moment along the timeline and we ask ourselves, like, what is the contents of the moment? What is this, right? Now, obviously there's going to be a lot of things in the moment that we are particularly like zooming into. And I don't think that we can zoom in on a discrete moment. In my mind, there's no such thing as a discrete moment. There's only scales. And as we go, as we zoom in further and further, different parts of reality kind of change in particular ways based upon the granularity that we're looking with. But, let's just say this is like an incredibly brief moment, but a still human recognizably brief moment. As we increase the kind of resolution of the range that we're zooming into, what's going to happen is it's no longer going to appear as a human experience. It's going to appear as something that exists between the human experiences that we have. Although they appear to us as continuous moments, there's, if you try to search for the discrete moment in time, you're going to break everything down into further and further constituent parts. What I'm trying to point out here is that in this moment, if we ask this person, if we could somehow, kind of look into their brain and experience the moment that they're having, do they believe that they are living in a timeless universe, right? And the answer is no, right? So in this moment right here, where we take a very specific slice that is fine enough to where, but like fine enough that it's considered like a single moment within the human perspective, but also not so fine that it falls apart into something that's entirely unhuman. And what we would say is that during that range, within that range, there's going to be kind of 3 things going on in addition to everything else that gives the person this illusion that they don't live in a timeless universe. So the first thing is going to be that they came from a moment. The second thing is going to be that they are going to a moment. And then the third thing, which is constituted of these two things, is going to be they are currently in a moment, right? And so what we're saying essentially is that, you know, the existence of some object that experiences progression of time, or what we would describe as time, doesn't actually require anything within that universe to be changing. It can just be a single static object. That's the single entire universe. If we zoom in to any human experience, there's always a sense of I came from the past, a sense of I'm going into the next moment, and then a sense of I'm currently somewhere in a moment. Now, obviously, like these moments aren't, and these senses are not binary senses. They're not like they're not discrete. There's kind of like a range of senses that you experience, but we can describe that range as being constituted of some amount of one of these three pieces, right? So you feel some amount of coming from a moment, you feel some amount of being in a moment, and you feel some amount of going to a moment in every single range that we define along this four-dimensional slice. And then, you know, from this model, we can basically describe our kind of I guess I'd say like human behavior and human action, you know, in the similar way that we'd like examine, let's say like a really intricate fractal through like a 3D space. So what you'd be seeing is that for every, you know, kind of piece, I think it's different than a fractal though, because essentially what you'd be seeing is that for every, if we have like the fourth dimension, we call it like, let's say like Q, for every slice of Q, or some range, not slice, because we can't get discrete slices, but some range of Q that's small enough, we'd be seeing that for every little piece that's changed, so let's say this piece is changed based upon our small defined range, the piece here is changing or has like evolved or developed from this position to this position based upon this position's value, right? And so it's kind of like you can think of it like a function essentially, where like you have some state X, and when you place that into the function, you get Y. But then what we reveal is that f of X, yeah, it's going to be like dependent on X. So it's going to be like, I don't know if this is the correct notation for this side of the equation, but essentially what we're saying is that the previous state of our function is defining the future behavior of our function based upon the like how that function is defined, right? So whatever we create here in this instance is now going to dictate what is created here in this instance based upon this arrow here. So what's happening in this arrow here is that we're existing within our universe, and our universe defines some set of constraints that our slice or our range is propagating through, and then based upon those rules we're getting, you know, this progression. And within this progression, each different slice, the human experience is that of time progressing. I don't think that this is like a novel concept. I think that this has been explored before, but I want to also connect it to space, because the big picture that I have here is that the universe is infinite in depth and infinite in size, but not because there is an infinite amount of stuff, but because there's only one stuff. So I don't know if that makes sense, but there's like this, so there's like this thing, right? And that's the universe. And it's actually not changing. And it's also not existing in like a spatial place, because there's no, so you can't have a boundary on this, because if you think of like, what is the boundary to our universe? There's nothingness, right? But like by definition, nothingness is not like a spatial dimension. It's nothing, right? So anything necessarily exists in the universe, and anything outside of it that doesn't exist. That's not a thing, right? There's no, it's kind of redundant to say, but there's nothing in nothing, right? And so there is no boundary to this single yet infinite, I'm going to say, object that exists. Now, the experience of time is very simple, right? This isn't a hard concept to understand. Basically what we are is I don't want to say a fourth dimensional, because I don't know necessarily that we can argue about like the dimensionality of how time is progressing, because I think there's a deep connection that we can see in physics between space and time. And so it may be that time as we experience it isn't in the way that we think of it here in this example as like another spatial dimension, but it could be some other mechanism. But regardless of that, I don't believe that this thing that I'm talking about experiences any change as we understand change to be. I think that we experience change because this is occurring. Every single one of these pieces of information, or these pieces of senses that we're experiencing in our little slice that we take out of our life, there's some physical structure in our brain is configured in the way to have one of these senses.